Hey, my name is Aaron Zakowski. I am the co-founder of Genius Scouts, our personal branding agency, also a happy husband and father of 6 kids here in Los Angeles.
Love it. Aaron, what is your secret to a good life?
My secret to a good life, I would have to be is being grateful to God for everything that he gives me and recognizing that it all comes from him. And when we recognize that we don't necessarily earn everything, that everything is a blessing and a gift that's given to us, then we can be grateful and happy with it and not compare ourselves to anybody else and recognize that we have what we need and we're not comparing ourselves and we trust in God that he's always going to provide us what we need.
Mm. So one of my core values in my life, I've got 5 of them, and I went through this exercise and consolidated down, right? Like, okay, it's important to be honest. It's important to have integrity. I combined those into integrity, right? And so then I narrowed it down to 5. One of those is gratitude for me. So this is a subject that is one of my favorites, and the specifics of the mechanism of gratitude is what is particularly like, this sounds almost irreverent, but is like how to use gratitude to combat all of the things that are trying to bring you down. And so I'm curious from your perspective, right? Do you have habits or like a system in place for like when something happens, I express gratitude? Well, when I'm feeling down, I stand up, I walk away from my desk and I go into nature and I just think of 10 things that I'm grateful for. Or, I sit down whenever I'm feeling worn out or whenever I get a big failure and I just write down 10 things that I'm grateful for. Do you have any rituals like that, habits or processes that you use to systemize the gratitude in your life?
Well, I think within the biggest framework is I'm a practicing Orthodox Jew. So therefore, within our lifestyle, there are a lot of customs, there are a lot of laws and things that are fixed for us. And big parts of it are, we pray 3 times a day. We study the Torah, we study the Bible every day. That helps to ingrain within us. I think times for gratitude, it's baked into our prayer book and such. One of my personal focuses, there's lots of things within Jewish literature that we could be learning. I have a focus every day on learning topics related to gratitude and trust in God. So I have a 10-minute WhatsApp group audio that kind of comes to me every day. I make sure as a ritual, I listen to it every day because it just reminds me to focus on where's everything coming from, remind myself to have gratitude and all that. So I try to train myself for at least 10 minutes every day to have that mindset. But then additionally, in terms of rituals, often when I'm driving or just when things happen, I try to remind myself everything good in my life, like I said before, it comes from God. So therefore, I want to verbally say thank you. I'm going to speak out loud. Maybe people driving by, they look like I'm crazy, talk to myself. Maybe they just hopefully think I'm on wireless or something. But, just creating that relationship with God and verbally saying thank you and listing the things that I'm grateful for. I'll go through a list of my mind or verbally just saying, I'm thankful for my wife. I'm thankful for my kids. I'm thankful for my health. I'm thankful I have a home. I have a bed. I have a pillow. I have a warm blanket. I have food in my stomach. I have everything I need. And I can compare my life to anybody else who might have more. But the important thing to recognize is very few people in the world have all the things, right? In terms of love and support and family, in terms of health, in terms of wealth, in terms of luxury and all those things. Very few people have all those things. So we can always compare our life to somebody who has more than us in one of those sections. But, for example, I know people who are very wealthy and they've said they wish they had the family life that I had. Or I know other people who have a great family life, but they don't have health. And so we've got to be thankful for things that we give, because I believe that God gives every one of us the tests that we need. So every one of us, I think, feels like we have a shortcoming in some part of our life, in one of the categories of our life that we wish was better. But that challenge that we have was custom designed by God for us, because that's the thing that we need to grow. That's the challenge that we can handle. And the fact that we're still going shows that we can handle it, right? So we should never be jealous of what anybody else has, because we shouldn't want to trade with them. They have things that we don't have, but those are the things that are personally crafted by God for us.
I love that. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask, and I hope that you'll appreciate this. So let's say that you had a time machine. You could go back to a time that you were vulnerable. Any age, just think through, right? 16, 6 years old, 26 years old. It doesn't matter, right? A time where stuff was hard. And you could go back and you could write down a piece of insight, just a little piece of advice. whether that is, just be grateful for X or Y, or if it's something specific related to what is happening to you at that time. But you've got basically a fortune cookie sized piece of paper that you can scribble something down on and you can put it in your pocket as a 6-year-old, 16-year-old, 26-year-old. How old are you in your mind? And what are you writing down on that piece of paper and why? What was going on?
Sure. Great question. I'd probably say about a year and a half ago. So I'm 46 now. I was probably 44 then. I was running a marketing agency for about 8-9 years at that point. And despite all my best efforts, things just weren't going well. Partially was, where we were in the economy 2 years ago, especially my agency was focused on helping SaaS companies. So the VC world, the tech world was really being hit by the economy a few years ago. But for whatever it is, and I take a lot of responsibility for maybe not running that business well, it was time to shut the business down. It kind of failed. It crumbled. My income disappeared. I had to lay off a handful of people that were working for me at the time. It totally sucked. I was fortunate at the time that I was working with a really talented mindset coach that I had started working with just a short time before that. His name's Cliff Ravenscraft. Highly recommend him. But I think the thing that got me through that time that I'm now living with a little bit better, it ties into that. It was also around the same time that I was starting to learn this idea of trust in God. Even though I've been religious for a very, very long time, this was kind of a new concept to me. So I think the fortune cookie would be the future is going to be okay. Everything today is okay. Well, it might not be succinct enough to fit on a fortune cookie, but everything today is fine. We're always worrying about the future. But the future always seems to work out okay also. So stop worrying about the future, right? God's got it. So like all of our worries, I think most of our anxiety comes from what's going to be tomorrow. Am I going to have enough money tomorrow? I'm going to have whatever the thing is I need tomorrow. But today is amazing. Today I have every single thing I need in my life. I'm lacking absolutely nothing, right? So far, the track record has been every single day of my 46 years has been exactly like that. I've had everything I need, right? So why do I keep worrying about the future? I still do it. Can't say that I'm not guilty of it. But what I'm trying to train myself is just stop worrying about the future because every single day has been fantastic.
I had a mentor, this guy named Rich Christensen out of BYU. And my son was in the NICU at the time. And we were on, it was like the 5th floor of the business building. And I was telling him about everything that was going wrong and all these stresses and anxieties I had. And this is an older guy, right? He was probably, 60. And he said, you have no evidence to suggest that you don't make it, right? Like, show me any evidence that you don't have the capabilities to figure it out and that you don't make it. Here you are, So look at all that stuff and use all of that to logic yourself into this moment and realize like you've got all the tools. You always have all the tools. They've always been there for you. You just have to actually pick them up and use them. And man, that just punched me right in the heart. And it didn't make it any easier, frankly. Like it was still so difficult. But I remember thinking, I'm invincible, which was totally delusional naivety at that point, right? That was the insight that I took from it. It was like, aha, like I make it no matter what. I've been invincible all these years. And I've used that. And so that absolutely resonates with me.
Well, I like what you said, but I might challenge it a little bit, at least from my point of view, right? I think I've got a lot of tools also. I think I'm a smart guy. I think I'm hardworking. I've been around the block. I got some experience and wisdom. But I also recognize that none of the results are a result of my work. At least my perspective is that all the blessings I have are from God. So my job in this world is I need to plant seeds and I have to do the absolute best that I can, right? So I'm going to work. I've heard the quote, I'm going to work like it all depends on me. I'm going to pray like it all depends on God, right? Because I believe that it does all come from God. And I'm going to work in my work, on my family, on my relationships, on my health, all those things in this world based on what logic would tell me is the way to make it work, right? Because that's what I believe God has put us in this world to do, to create this world and to make this world a better place. But the results are not dependent on me. So what that means from a mindset point of view is that I'm going to do everything I can and I'm going to feel good about my effort, right? And I'm going to know that I've done everything I can. And if it doesn't work out the way that I wanted, well, then that's what God believes is best for me. And I wasn't meant to have the result that I wanted or expected, but I'm going to trust that I got the result that I needed. And sometimes when we pray for something, whether it's income, whether it's, health, or we've got someone who's like in a hard situation, like you said, your son in the NICU. I've had my son in the NICU also at one point when my oldest was first born. And it's really scary. And thank God, I think both of our situations, everything came out just fine, right? But sometimes the answer isn't always good, right? And that's painful. And I think that's where the trust also has to come in God, that we did everything we could. We put in the best hospital with the best care, and we prayed and we did all the things. But sometimes the answer is no. And that's really a hard thing to accept, I think, for all of us. And I'm not saying it's easy for anybody, right? I thank God I've never had to go through those things. But recognizing we plant the seeds and the results come from God. He has to make it grow.
So speak to me like I am an atheist, because as you know, I was born and raised Mormon, very, very religious, very, very God-centered. And I've had a lot of people on the show who give glory to God, whether it's the God of the Old Testament or the God of the New Testament, or I've never had any Zoroastrians on my show, but I'm sure that there's people out there trusting in Ahura Mazda. But talk to me like somebody who has had a faith crisis and is not able to give it to God. What kind of things would you encourage that person to do in order to have the same level of gratitude and confidence in the road ahead when they don't feel comfortable giving it up to some divine creator?
It's a good question. I'll tell you, I believe very strongly in my beliefs and in God and all that, but I also recognize why some people might not. And I think it's a good thing, because I don't judge because of that. I understand why someone can come to very different conclusions. I understand why people might believe in different things than I do, right? I think most of us recognize a lot of people say they don't believe in God, and I don't mean to disparage that. They probably don't, but it's because they can't logically come to explain it to themselves. And that's okay, because you can't really logically explain God. But I think most of us, including many people who profess to be atheists, still have an element within them where they just recognize there's something more. They feel it as an energy. They feel it as a spirit. They feel it as something more than themselves. And they might not define it as God. They might not define it within any way of organized religion. So there is some element there where they can still grasp onto these concepts. They can still relate to these concepts, but it makes it harder to put your full faith into something that you believe that logically doesn't really exist. But I do think, a lot of what I'm describing can be explained through positive psychology. I think, the idea of thinking good and it will be good, those things exist even with a non-religious perspective. Again, not everybody buys into that. And I think the people who don't believe in it oftentimes struggle. I certainly don't want to say that about everybody. There's some very positive, very mentally healthy people who don't believe in God or any religion or anything like that. But I think there have been a number of studies that have done that people who do believe in a higher power do have more positivity and generally mental health in their lives. Again, not to say there are many people in religious communities of all sorts who are not mentally healthy and don't really grasp the world very well. So I don't know if there's a cause and effect. To me, I think these principles can be applied even outside of a framework, but everyone's got to do their own mental gymnastics, so to speak, to figure out how they want to relate to them. Because I think that's what we all do, whether it's in religion, outside of religion, to come to grips with ideas that we want.
There's a book out there called Everything is Fucked, a book about hope by Mark Manson. And in that book, he talks about creating your own religion, right? So he goes through having rituals and having some form of prayer and having some congregative activity. And so the principles of like good living and positive psychology are present in most of the major religions of which I am aware. I've had 2 Scientologists on the show, and boy, that religion is very much a mindset-oriented religion. They take the learnings from the founder and they apply them in ways that are neuropsychologically relevant to every human being. And so, as somebody who I served a mission for the Mormon Church, right? So I was out knocking doors with my name tag on and everything. It's actually where I met my wife. She was also a missionary at the time, so it's we were deep into it. And what I found exploring atheism for myself, right? Because we left the Mormon Church, and the first place that I went was atheism, and the next place that I went was nihilism, right? So you can imagine how lost I was during that time. But what I've ended up doing now is I've looked back on all of the miracles that I've witnessed, things that I labeled as miracles, and all of the positive things that I was able to garner from the church and from my religious rituals and experiences. And I've tried to position those in such a way that they are, more an activity in psychology, just like you mentioned, where I know that when I'm grateful, just in general, I don't have to be religious to be grateful, right? I don't have to give the glory to God. I can just be grateful for things.
Yep.
There is a neurochemical response in the body that allows you to feel a reduction in cortisol, right? We know this. You can produce those chemicals in your brain. And so what I typically tell the atheists is, in place of God, right? If it's a non-negotiable for you, you're just like absolutely convinced of no divinity in the universe and it's all just rocks flying in space, then what you must do, and I want to get your thoughts and if you agree with this, what you must do is come up with rituals and frameworks and beliefs that allow you to tap into those things that religious people are tapping into. Because when we sing, for instance, right, there is a profound neuropsychological response inside of the body. You're filled with dopamine and serotonin, and you're just like juicing your brain with all kinds of good stuff. And the vibrations that are going through your chest and through your head have been shown on heat maps to send energy through your spine. And so, what I tell, the typical atheist is you can't abandon prayer when it works, right? The thing works. Kneeling down and closing your eyes often, right? And putting your head to the ground, right? Supplicating yourself and giving glory to something bigger than you. It doesn't have to be God. It could be the planet. It could be your family lineage for all the ritual requires. But that process, God, it works. The proof's in the pudding, and you don't need to give it to God. And so that's what I do, is find those things that you can feel not completely crazy doing and build them into your life in such a way that you are generating the neurochemical responses in your body that allow you to reduce stress and stay on the right track and be happy and all that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I totally agree. Like you said, everyone's got to find their way of doing it. But the whole study, which fortunately become popularized in the last number of years of positive psychology, right? It's all about those types of things, and creating rituals, creating practices, meditation. Otherwise, I mean, think about a Tony Robbins seminar, right? It's not a religious experience, but in some ways it's a religious experience for people totally outside of religion. And I think there's so many things where you're taking the body language, you're taking the movement, you're taking the gratitude, you're taking the mantras, all those things, and people leave it totally uplifted. It's on my bucket list of things I want to do, is go to one of the seminars. I haven't done it yet, but I've listened to hours and hours and hours of his recordings. So I think there's a whole world of it. You can tap into these things without necessarily having religion or belief in God as a part of it.
I want to take a couple steps back to a year and a half ago, when things were going a little bit sideways for you, when the business was getting shut down, you had to make a big pivot. Outside of the emotional, inspirational advice that you would give yourself to just trust in yourself and be grateful and understand that it's all going to work out, is there a specific piece of advice that you would give yourself to that past version of yourself that would help you avoid some of the pains associated with the loss of the business and the pivot that you made in the future? Is there anything that you could give yourself to maybe accelerate the timeline, or just maybe a cheat code for the next year and a half that might have put you a couple steps ahead of where you are today?
Great question. I'm not sure, because I'm still on that path of figuring out what's next. I spent a year working as a fractional CMO, basically just doing consulting, trying to figure out what's next. Now I'm starting a new business. It's still growing and getting off the ground. So I still haven't fully landed from that. But psychologically, I think maybe one of the things that I struggle with is just taking risks. And maybe it goes together with recognizing like everything's going to be okay. God's going to catch you. But therefore, if you want big blessings, you sometimes have to take big risks. I've always been a little bit risk averse. I've always wondered, because I'm worrying about tomorrow, primarily with money. That's where a lot of my worries come from. Because thank God I'm totally blessed in all my other areas of life. If I'm worrying about having enough money tomorrow, I'm kind of pinching my dollars today, when really I know psychologically that one of the best ways to make money tomorrow is to invest more money today. Whether it's on advertising, whether it's on hiring a coach, whether it's on hiring people to delegate more of my tasks. There's so many ways we can invest in faster growth in a business environment, right? But I've always been very hesitant to make those investments. And there's the idea of having faith over fear, right? And I've always allowed fear to overcome my faith. Faith that the future, that if I do things, the future is going to turn out right. I'm going to succeed. It's going to all work out the way I want to do, versus the fear that if I invest this money, I might lose it. Right. And so therefore I become very risk averse versus having confidence that taking these bets, these gambles, these investments are going to pay off in the future. It's something I know psychologically, and it's hard to do still.
So is the advice to gamble more? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not gamble. It's definitely not gambling. It's taking calculated risks, but investing in yourself, right? So again, I guess maybe the fact that I'm even using the word gamble, because I did say that word, is showing some of my lack of faith in some of those things, because it shouldn't be a gamble. It should be an investment. It should be, I really think investment's the best way. Again, like I said, it's whether it means putting money in advertising, whether it means hiring people, whether investing yourself in coaches that could help you make a better version of yourself, or getting past your psychological hangups. I've been discussing some of mine here today. But those investments should help us get ahead and pay off bigger in the future. But when you see them as a gamble, when you see them as, oh, but it might not pay out, then it's really hard to do those things that are going to get you ahead in life more quickly. So some of the things I'm struggling with.
Aaron, where can everyone find you?
I would love to connect with people on LinkedIn if you want to find me over there.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Sure, thank you.
This has been the Pulse Ox podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.